Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to Community Unitarian Universalist Church. So good to see all of you here, in spite of rain, or because of rain. I'm Reverend Dr. Aija Duelm. I'm the minister of this congregation, and I welcome all of you here. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to gather in worship to practice what it means to be human. We're called to bring a teaching of hope, to bring a saving message, and to welcome all in our doors. Welcome all. The joyful and the heartbroken, atheists and Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, people of faith and people who claim no faith in particular. Straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, non-gender, transgender, all who are searching, looking for more meaning, more service, and more love. All of us gathered here today to practice what it means to be human. I would like to start with a story, and you may have heard this story at some point in your life, so please bear with me. This is a story about a seasoned hiker who was walking through the forest when he came upon a broad, slowly moving river. He stopped to gaze over the waters, appreciating the beauty, when he suddenly heard a faint cry coming from upstream. Looking in the direction of the noise, he saw an obviously drowning man floundering in the river and drifting slowly toward him. The hiker was stunned momentarily, but he sprang into action when he saw the man disappear beneath the waters. Throwing off all of his cumbersome gear, he dove into the river and swam like a madman toward the spot where the man went under. Upon reaching the spot, he plunged below the surface and frantically hauled up the helpless man. He then laboriously towed the victim to shore, heaving the lifeless body up on the riverbank. The hiker attempted to revive the man, who eventually spit up water and began to breathe. Relieved, the hiker paused to catch his breath. But no sooner had he done so than he heard another cry out on the water. Another drowning person? Once again, he swam out, pulled the person to shore, a little more slowly this time. As the hiker turned lifeguard revived the second victim, he heard yet another cry. All day long, the hiker worked, rescuing one person after another as they came drifting down the river. There seemed to be no end of drowning victims, and the hiker didn't think he could keep it up. Just when he was about to collapse from exhaustion, he spotted another man walking rapidly beside the river, headed upstream. "Hey, mister," he cried out. "Please help me. These poor people are drowning." Amazingly, the man kept walking upstream. The astonished hiker called out again. Without even acknowledging the cry, the man kept walking. Indignant and angry at this point, the hiker leaped to his feet, ran towards the uncompassionate man, stood directly in his path, and in a loud voice demanded, "Sir, how can you possibly walk past all these drowning people? Have you no conscience? Must I force you to help me save these people? The stranger stopped, looked at him for the first time, and said with a calm, focused voice, "Sir, please get out of my way. I'm headed upstream to stop the one who is pushing all these people in." This story has been used as an analogy for a variety of occasions, and today I want to use it to talk about theology. Particularly the fancy word soteriology, which is salvation in layman's terms. You probably know that Unitarian Universalism came into existence when two denominations merged. We had Unitarian Church and we had Universalist Church, and the two of them merged to create what we know today as UUs. The Universalists were the group that believed in universal salvation. That's why Universalists. And they were, this idea of universal salvation was so popular. At one point, this denomination was the 9th largest denomination in the States. A lot of our UU history is connected to Calvinist theology. And without risking to become really dry when I talk about Calvin, I'll just say this, that Calvin's thought system argued that some of us would be saved in that river and others would drown. And it was really up to God. And Jesus was that hiker who saved a few out of this river. Of course, salvation in this picture is about the everlasting life in heaven, a supernaturally formed place in time and space. And the opposite of that was eternal condemnation or hell. The Universalists did not like this picture. And they were kind of really appalled about this idea that God could send some people to hell for eternal condemnation. Hosea Ballou, one of the most influential people among Universalists, he was horrified to think that God would do this, like pushing people in water to drown. And Hosea Ballou saw the work of Jesus as that man who was walking up the stream to stop the one from pushing people in the water. So that wouldn't, nobody would even be drowning at that point. So it's an illustration, it's a story, and metaphors work only a little bit. When you start pushing them, they kind of fall apart. So I'll stop here with this metaphor. But let's talk about Ballou. He really was in the river when he was 17, being baptized in the cold waters of New England in January. Apparently, when revival hits, you cannot wait for a warmer weather. Hosea was born as the 11th child in a rather poor family. His mother died when he was 2 years old. His father, Maturin, was a farmer and a preacher. He was the Calvinist preacher. And the quote that Scott gives us is that the rigors of farm life were not more burdensome than the heavy weight of the Calvinist doctrines that Maturin, Hosea Ballou's father, placed upon his children. So when after baptism, Hosea wanted to know the reasons of his new faith that he had accepted, what does it believe and claim, there really was no point of asking his father any questions because he already knew what the answers would be. So he went to the Bible, and he was disturbed to find many passages that seemed to contradict what he was taught. Through his study and listening to nearby preachers, Hosea came across this strange doctrine called Universalism, and then became an ardent preacher of this message. In 1805, he published one of his most significant works, Treatise on Atonement. So if John Murray is known for bringing this thought to the United States from England, from Europe, then Hosea Ballou is credited to be the most influential theologian that advanced this thought in the States. Ballou preached that God loved all people and saved all because all people are worthy. And today, we still hold onto this doctrine that all people are worthy. Each and every person has worth and dignity. Each one of us. We made it into our principles. Currently, it's the first one that we have. We no longer believe in supernatural heaven and hell like people did in those days. So how do we think about salvation as you use? Do we still need to be saved? From what? For what? Maybe we only focus on the way salvation is seen in Buddhism and Hinduism as understanding, peace, not being weighed down by karma, instead of all that fuss around salvation as a way to defeat evil and stop the harm. You and I know what it is like when waters are reaching up to our noses and we are about to drown. Maybe in the midst of unexpected crisis, or when the health seems to have run away, or relationships go sour. We're deciding what is best here for Community UU Church. We're simply listening to political debates. At some point in our personal or professional lives, we have found ourselves overwhelmed and helpless, to the point that it seemed beyond our imagination to figure out how to make a way out, and wish that someone would come to our aid and rescue us. It's possible that some of us are in such a place today where we know someone who is struggling to survive while multiple stressors, various macro and microaggressions, institutionalized forms of oppression are coming wave after wave, from attacks on trans people and women's rights for health care, to banning books, to gun violence, to war crimes in Ukraine and war violence in Israel. It feels like there is more that is yet to come. All of these things coming at us sometimes all at once with such a force that staying above waters require all of our strength, all of our creativity that can be found in the moment, and it may not be much left in us. So it's no wonder that, as you may have noticed, that we are way too familiar with the notion of superpowers and superheroes. This notion of saviors who fight the evil and rescue people from suffering. We have Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Catwoman, Wonder Woman, Thor, Captain America, and so on. I took these from a website that's called 100 Favorite Superheroes. If this is not enough, we live in a place known as the Bible Belt. We hear this language of salvation from our colleagues, neighbors, people at the grocery store, and yes, even our family members and friends. When we are feeling helpless and overwhelmed and struggling, we imagine or hope that maybe someone would come and rescue us, pull us out of the water. And as you use, we probably would call these people heroes, not saviors, just because. As I was preparing for this sermon, I was thinking about national heroes. And many of you know that I was born in Latvia. My people do have national heroes. Actually, I'll tell you about one. I was 14 when Latvians began to fight for freedom from the Soviet occupation. And together with 2 million people, I stood in the so-called human chain. We joined hands together and formed a line across 3 countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, from the capital cities, from Tallinn, which is all the way up north in Estonia, then coming down through Latvia, through Riga, going down to Vilnius, capital of Lithuania. This protest was a peaceful protest to symbolize the unity of all 3 Baltic states in this fight for freedom. Half a year later, tanks rolled in the capital cities of all 3 countries. They were part of OMON, a specialized riot unit of the USSR. They violently seized government buildings and threatened us with war if we continue to demand independence. Latvians gathered with garden rakes and forks and formed the barricades. Yes, garden rakes and forks. Because Latvians were an agricultural community. They didn't have their own army. All they had was their tools that they used for farming for years. People from all walks of life joined together, sending petitions to God and drawing on a national hero for inspiration. This national hero, which I translated, called Bear Slayer. It comes from an epic poem. That poem was written in the time between 1872 and 1888, and it was based on local legends about events that were related to crusades and the Christianization of the country of Latvia, and the people's efforts at that time to fight for freedom. At the end of this poem, Bear Slayer is fighting the Black Knight, and all of his strength is in his ears. So when his ear is cut off, but just before he loses all of his strength, he throws the knight into the river, and the river is called Daugava. But the knight manages to grab Bear Slayer with him, and they both disappear into the water. The last line of this poem says, "To this day, fishermen can see Bear Slayer fighting with the Black Knight, and when he wins, people will be free." Through songs and plays, this hero once again inspired people, mobilized their yearnings for freedom, and drew out the strength to fight the oppressor. People came together, international community came together, and Latvia became a free country. Womanist theologian Monica Coleman, in her book Making Way Out of No Way, says that it is not the Savior that saves. It is the message and life of the Savior. Let me say it again. It is not the Savior that saves. It is the life and message of the Savior. The message is love. Love that works toward justice and healing. Love is that superpower that brings about salvation. And friends, we have love in our midst. We heard that from the children. I've heard many stories about how this faith has given life and meaning to so many, how this community of UUs has put love into action and made lives better. You wrote messages on the wall. Do you still remember that wall that we created this summer? There were many messages saying that this community has a lot of deep meaning. It has brought a sense of belonging to you and made your lives richer and more meaningful. There are heroes among us. There are saviors among us who have loved and worked to stop the harm, to right the injustice, to alleviate the pain, and who continue to use their superpowers to help others. As Coleman says, we cannot attain wholeness, health, peace, and justice as individuals. Making way out of no way is a responsibility that lies with all of us. All of us. You and I. You and I enact salvation when we participate in this community that seeks to teach and heal. And the need is great. We're called on once again, whether we're ready, as always, or weary and disheartened, to lean on each other for support, and even more so now than before. Keep loving, keep going, keep hoping, one step at a time. So I leave you today with one question. How do you want to use your superpower?